In our previous video, we looked at the most important anachronisms in the Torah and saw they indicate parts of the 5 books were written after Moses lived. Jesus and Paul attribute the Pentateuch to Moses. See Mark, Luke, John, Romans, even Hebrews. How can we reconcile these two statements? As I read the Torah, I saw many verses that make Moses the author. How can we put together the anachronisms, the retrojections, and the verses that say Moses wrote the law? I have given a lot of thought to this. Some have proposed that place names in certain parts were added or edited after Moses wrote it. One such author is Michael Grisanti. You can read his article online for free. I wasn't convinced by his position, but there are good points he makes as he tries to hold to Mosaic authorship and accept the anachronisms and retrojections at the same time. The question remains, is Moses the author or not? Here is my take. Again and again, we are told Moses wrote or was told to write. Here are the most important examples. Exodus 17:14. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this as a memorial in a book and recite it in the ears of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under the heaven." We see God giving Moses specific orders to write a historical scroll that would be a reminder for Joshua specifically, but for the other Israelites too. Another passage is Exodus 24. Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the rules. And all the people answered with one voice and said, "All the words that the Lord has spoken we will do." And Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. Moses receives the decrees from the Lord on the mountain. He comes down, shares them with the people, and writes down all the words of the Lord. We see Moses writing again. Exodus 34. And the Lord said to Moses, "Write these words, for in accordance with these words I have made a covenant with you and with Israel." He was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. He neither ate bread nor drank water, and he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 Commandments. Moses is alone with God on the mountain, and he is ordered to write the 10 Commandments. He is the only human there. This adds to the proof that at least parts of the Torah were written by Moses. Numbers 11. Now 2 men remained in the camp, one named Eldad and the other named Medad, and the Spirit rested on them. They were among those registered, but they had not gone out of the tent, and so they prophesied in the camp. The word for registered is the verb to write. We see again that there were documents which recorded different details of the wilderness journey. Some were passed on, some were not. We don't have the names of the 70 elders except for these 2, Eldad and Medad. But this verse indicates a scroll with all 70 names was written. I guess it paid out for these 2 guys to skip that meeting. Numbers 33. These are the stages of the people of Israel when they went out of the land of Egypt by their companies under the leadership of Moses and Aaron. Moses wrote down their starting places stage by stage by command of the Lord, and these are their stages according to their starting places. This is another text where we are told Moses was commanded by God to write down the stations. Almost the entire chapter is composed of the names of the stations. Still, as we can see from Exodus, Deuteronomy, and other chapters in Numbers, not all the stations are mentioned in chapter 33. Deuteronomy 31. Then Moses wrote this law and gave it to the priests, the sons of Levi, who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and to all the elders of Israel. When Moses had finished writing the words of this law in a book, to the very end, Moses commanded the Levites who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord, "Take this book of the law and put it by the side of the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, that it may be there for a witness against you." We see Moses writing the law, and even a complete scroll is said to have been written by Moses. It's this document that is probably mentioned in Joshua 1, 8, and 23. And according to Joshua 24:26, he might have added parts to it. The verses mentioned previously are proof at least parts of the Torah were written by Moses. Not only this, but he drives the action from Exodus 1 to Deuteronomy 34. He is quoted hundreds of times when we have phrases like Moses said, Moses wrote, the Lord spoke to Moses, so on and so forth. Leviticus is in its entirety such an example. These can be interpreted as block quotes from the original Mosaic documents. Genesis 5:1 uses the word for scroll when it presents the descendants of Seth. This indicates older sources were used in the composition of the genealogy found in Genesis 5. The tablet theory, aka Wiseman theory, proposes that where the word Toledoth is used in Genesis, it uses patriarchal sources in the composition of the first book. Numbers 21:13-14 specifically quotes the book of the words of the Lord. This is clear proof of a named document being used in the composition of the Torah. An Israelite poem is quoted in the same chapter. There is no doubt other scrolls were used as sources. Other books in the Old Testament quote or reference other documents too. For example, the book of Joshua and 2 Samuel quote from the book of Jasher. Joshua 10:13, 2 Samuel 1:18. Be aware, the so-called book of Jasher you can find online is a forgery. The actual book of Jasher has been lost. The author of Chronicles mentions his sources, which were possibly the books of Samuel or the documents that were the primary documents for Samuel. See 1 Chronicles 29:29. Kings and Chronicles mention the Chronicles of the Kings, documents we don't have anymore. All these were primary sources used in the composition of these books. Just to be perfectly clear, I do not hold to the documentary hypothesis view, which is very different from mine. The question remains though, how do we reconcile Mosaic authorship and the Anachronisms? Here is my theory. The version penned during Moses' time was like a journal where a lot of different documents were written without having much of the current literary character. The good, the bad and the ugly, the boring and the entertaining, all these were penned down. Many different scrolls were written, the predominant material being written on goatskin. One document might include genealogies, others the law received by Moses at different times, others included the itinerary, etc. Some documents might have been much older cuneiform tablets passed on from the patriarchs, just like the tablet theory proposes. A few generations down the line, a scribe deemed it important to arrange Moses' words in a literary form that would serve historical and theological purposes, so the Israelites could learn it more easily and pass it on from generation to generation. As I have shown in the previous video, I placed the final form of the Torah around 1050 to 1000 BC approximately, up to David's 7th year. This means hundreds of years had passed since they settled in the Promised Land, no matter which Exodus theory you hold to. Until they conquered Canaan, the descendants of Abraham lived in foreign cultures that spoke a variety of languages or dialects. Once they settled, their language was able to reduce the influence it got from Egypt, for example. It's known that languages change over the centuries. The languages that suffered the least change are located on islands. Icelandic is such an example. But Canaan was a melting pot during the New Kingdom period. I would expect the Hebrew language to have major changes in a few hundred years. Just read documents from 300-400 years ago in your own language and see how it changed. Most languages go through dramatic changes in 3-4 centuries. The Israelites were now free to invent, write, develop, and create literary works. There must have been a major language shift, especially in these first centuries of their settlement. The language of the Pentateuch is part of the classical Hebrew style. Job, on the other hand, has the most difficult and bizarre vocabulary in all of the Old Testament. Romanian scholar Cristian Rata writes this in an article about Job's vocabulary. It is reported that F.M. Cross claimed that 50% of Job remains unintelligible, and M. Dahoud thought that at least 30% of the verses were untranslated. Yes, these might be overstatements, but you get the point. It's the hardest Old Testament book to translate. Why? As I've argued in other videos on Job, I concluded he's an Edomite that probably overlapped Moses' life. Ethnicity, time, and location are the most important factors when it comes to a language. The Kedemites spoke a language similar to the Israelites, but as centuries passed, the shared language changed. The book of Job kept many of these distinctions. This final form of the Torah that puts together a variety of documents comes with translations, word updates, redactions, glosses, explanations, and emendations here and there. That's why the Torah is filled with the words Moses said or the Lord spoke to Moses. I didn't count the exact number, but phrases like this appear hundreds of times from Exodus through Deuteronomy. My take is the original documents penned down during the time of Moses are quoted when these phrases appear. The change from the third to the first or second person indicates this. Does this make this unknown person the author? I don't think so. His main source is Moses. Moses is the main character, present from Exodus to Deuteronomy. Genesis is the only exception where he is not mentioned. The book of Exodus presents the story of Moses' life. His life story and the Exodus are inseparable. Leviticus presents again and again paragraphs of the law that God gave to Moses and deals mostly with issues of ritual cleanness. Number presents different episodes from the wilderness wanderings, and almost all of them have Moses as the main character. Deuteronomy are Moses' final words. It is a series of written sermons in the first person, but with many glosses inserted by the editor for historical clarity. In all these 4 books, Moses is the main character driving the action or through whom God speaks. Even if a later editor arranged his story and words in a more literary and accessible form, how can not one consider Moses as the author? Think about a book written today. When it's a collection of chapters, there are editors that arrange the materials, challenge the writer or writers on a series of issues they see. Here and there, they might add a footnote to make the material more accessible to the reader. Does that make the editor the writer of the book? Not at all. He simply collects and arranges an author's text in a more fashionable way. Moses is the main author of the text from Exodus to Deuteronomy. When I say author, I don't expect him to sit down and write. There were scribes who did that, but there are parts that were literally written by Moses himself. This was mentioned previously. The ancient people didn't have modern notions to make a distinction between an author and an editor. The editor used all these Mosaic documents to arrange the Torah in the final form. He inserted his own comments where needed. He even alluded to post-Mosaic elements such as certain judges or the Philistines. See my previous videos on Anachronisms. He wasn't trying to hide there as editorial work centuries after Moses. He was adding relevant information to the readers of his generation. We can only speculate whom this editor was based on the period 1050 to 1000 BC. It must have been a priest or prophet that had access to these documents. It could have been Samuel or Nathan, but we can't know for sure. I'm just speculating. History isn't written while it's happening, at least not in a literary fashion. The best books are written years after the events finished. Imagine writing a history of World War II in 1941. The war isn't even finished. Some have tried to write books as history happens. In 2022, Liz Truss became the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Some guys wanted to make money, so they launched a date for the publication of her biography only weeks after her inauguration. By the time it was published, Liz Truss resigned. Imagine the shame of these authors and the relevance of what they were writing. What can be done as history unfolds is to journal certain events and episodes. After the war ends, you can collect them and write a good literary work. It is so with the wilderness wanderings and the conquest, especially when the languages started changing through the centuries. In the end, Moses remains the main character and the essential author. He did not write or dictate every single word in the Torah. There is no way someone can support that, but he wrote most of it. What makes the difference is the percentage and the process by which the reader think it happened. Ultimately, we must give up on our modern lenses when it comes to understanding antiquity. As I mentioned, we have different Old Testament authors using multiple sources in the composition of their books. I am convinced Moses is the essential author of the Torah, and the retrojections exist due to an editor assembling together Mosaic documents around 1000 BC. What do you think about the theory I presented in this series? Please write your thoughts, questions, and objections in the comment section. By the way, don't forget to subscribe and please hit that like button if you found this useful. A share on the social media platforms would be very helpful. That's the only way we can grow this channel.